Welcome to Monobiology. Today we're going to look at reflex arcs. So here's a picture of the parts of a reflex arc, and we're just going to go through some of the basic parts, and then I'll kind of explain how it works, and then we'll go to the diagram that you folks would have in your workbook, and I'll make sure we go through some of the parts of that as well, because it's a little bit different. This picture is a little bit different than that one. So first of all, the reflex arc itself involves three major types of neurons. To refresh your memory what a neuron is, you could watch the neuron video that we had earlier in this unit. The first type of neuron that's involved in a reflex arc is a sensory neuron. Okay, and a sensory neuron would be attached directly to some sort of sense organs. In this case, it could be the skin or the muscle. Either way, it is the sensory neuron. The sensory neuron, once stimulated, is going to carry the message through all the way to what's called a relay, or sometimes called an interneuron. And that neuron is located directly in the spine. The relay neuron does exactly what it sounds like. It relays the message from the sensory neuron all the way to what's known as the motor neuron. The motor neuron is directly linked to muscle, and once the motor neuron has been stimulated, it'll essentially travel along until it gets to the muscle, and then the muscle will contract. So in this particular picture here, what's going on, this is called the knee-jerk reflex, and you've seen that on like cartoons and stuff where they hit the knee with a hammer and the leg kicks, and then they hit the knee harder and leg kicks harder, except that's not really how it works. But suffice to say, there is a reflex. If you hit just underneath the kneecap, which is known as the patella, it'll cause a reflex to happen. So the signal will be sent along this pathway, it will go to the muscle, and the muscle will contract and your leg will move. It won't, you're not going to knock the doctor out, but it will kick. Okay? So the whole pathway would involve not just the neurons, as discussed here, the sensory neuron, the interneuron, and the motor neuron. It would also involve the sensory cells that were stimulated to begin with, and the muscle cells that carry out the response. Okay, so similar to the endocrine system, these guys here, the sensory cells, are like the endocrine cells. Okay, they're going to send the message, but they don't send the message through the bloodstream, they send it through a series of neurons. The muscle cells are the target cells, or the effector cells. They're going to bring about a change. Okay, in this case, they're going to kick. They're going to react to that stimulus. Let's have a look now. Feel free to use this diagram, by the way, to help you fill in some of the information in the workbook, because you may be able to use this in some of the questions. So keep that in mind. Let's move on to this, and let's kind of just get an idea here. Okay, so first of all, you see the arrows here indicating that the signal is moving this way, like that. Okay, so this is the sensory neuron. The sensory neuron is going to carry the signal towards the spinal cord, and the interneuron is going to then pass the signal along to the motor neuron. It doesn't really show the interneuron here very well, but there it is. Okay, it would be in there. The motor neuron is going to carry the signal along. See these cells here? Those are muscle cell. Okay, so always look for those. That's going to tell you, if there's no arrows, that's going to tell you that this is the motor neuron, because it's attached to muscle cells. All right, so there's a couple other things I wanted to talk about here. First of all, there's a situation, what we're going to talk about, where, let's say we're talking about the knee-jerk reaction, like in the previous question. Let's say I hit the kneecap, or just below the kneecap, and nothing happens. What does that mean? Well, there's something in neurobiology that's called the all or none response. And that means that either the neuron is stimulated and it fires, or it is not stimulated enough and doesn't fire. That sounds like kind of common sense, but there's no such thing as a half stimulation or an overstimulation. It's either stimulated or it's not, which is why that I said earlier there will be no such thing as a really big kick the harder you hit the knee. Okay, so you hit the knee, it doesn't work. That means you didn't hit it hard enough to stimulate it. If you hit the knee even harder, then it will kick. If you hit the knee even harder again, it will still only kick. It won't kick harder. Okay, and that's because of the all or none response. The all or none response says that a neuron will fire or it won't if it's stimulated. Okay, now, in other parts of the body, and this is important too, in other parts of the body, it may take several neurons to be stimulated before an entire reflex would work. So in other words, just one or two of those neurons being stimulated won't cause the entire chain reaction to occur. It may take 8 or 9 or 10 of those neurons to fire before the reaction will happen. Okay? Another question I want to ask you is, why bother having the sensory neuron go to the spine at all? Why not just have the sensory neuron controlling the motor neuron? See if you can figure that out. Why would this whole process need to happen? Why wouldn't it just why wouldn't the initial stimulation just cause the muscle to contract? Why do we need to go through all of this? And by the way, it doesn't take very long, a fraction of a second. But why do we need to go through all of this? Why wouldn't the muscle just contract immediately upon being stimulated? What do you guys think? Bring your answer to class. I'd be interested in hearing that. And that in a nutshell, folks, is how a reflex arc works. There will be a little assignment around that. You'll see it beneath the video, part of your assignment for the day, on reflex arcs and another thing called conditioned reflexes. Don't forget to bring your questions to class and take some good notes on this.